You know, we don't want to stop people from giving out there, but then it becomes a form of martyrdom where you actually are doing it, and it can put people in a position of feeling resentment because they never feel they can never pay the debt back. So it's a form of control sometimes. And when you lead into your position when you're doing this, it's like a power balance, you know, it's a power struggle. It's a dynamic that you've learned from before.
It feels like I'm doing my best for everyone, and I just feel a little empty because people take it for granted. Why do I care?
There is this term coined by Katya Bostani called toxic generosity. And I think that's something that I have gone under as an example, because I think I can definitely relate to the feeling of, you know, being taken for granted, because I have this need to give to a degree. Like, I get such satisfaction from providing for people and from giving to people, and I would much rather give than I would receive. That's just how I've been wired. And I think that's also been conditioned from my childhood, the relationship that I had with my parents. They expected that I have to give, you know. And I think that's something that has become my code of behavior to a degree. So the amount of times I have found myself in situations where I felt not appreciated, you know, taken for granted, where, you know, everything that I felt like I invested in that relationship went down the drain just because I didn't fulfill somebody else's expectation of me. And this is a setup that I have myself created, because that to me was the only way to live, right? The only way to be. But like Alex said, you know, we think we're doing a kind act by giving to somebody, but that can be also putting them in a place of not being good enough, not being able to give back, and then have resentment towards that. Also, when we give, do we give wholeheartedly, or are we having expectations? Now, let's be completely honest with one another. We are human beings, and when you give and not to have expectation is such a form of altruism that's practically unattainable for humans, because we do still have a certain expectation that at least those people won't hurt us, yeah? And I've been into the situations where I've given so much, and the people that I've given so much to have hurt me the most. And then that made me realize, well, if it's easier for me to give than to receive, who is really at a loss here? Like, I have to force myself to receive. I have to really you know, condition myself to receiving, because for me, receiving came with guilt. So what I did subconsciously, I passed on that guilt to somebody else by overgiving to them.
That was a disbalance, and again, it comes down to feelings. Everything comes down to feelings. The feeling of when you give, the feeling of receiving. If you don't like the feeling of receiving, then of course, what are you going to do more of? Give. But then that you're not dealing with that feeling means that somebody else has to in some form, because energy transforms into something else. So when you're in a position like this, look at yourself going, why am I doing so much giving? What position am I putting these other people in for my giving?
And myself.
Yeah, and of course yourself.
Because you deplete your resources.
Yeah.
But you know, people...
Depending on what it is you're giving.
Yeah, exactly. But people have this idea, and I agree with that, and that's what I've been going with, that when you give, you affirm your abundance. And you establish a relationship with the universe, that you have the trust in the universe that it will come back to you. Even if it doesn't come back from the same source. I'm still like that. I cannot cut that part of myself out. I love to give, and I own it now. And I know that the universe gives me back tenfold, hundredfold every time. Might not be from the same person, but that's my lesson. But at the same time, I never go without. So it's like an affirming of abundance by actually constantly knowing that you're in the position to give, you're in the position of that abundant state. And when people come and take advantage, they're reaffirming their state of not having enough. If you have to take from somebody at their expense, you are reaffirming that you don't have enough. You can't create it yourself. So you are in the loop where you have to go down to, you know, almost criminal behavior, or you know, immoral behavior, only just to satisfy that little not enough feeling. So, abundance comes in many forms, and I think the beautiful balance between giving and receiving, if it's established in such a way where there is no guilt from both sides, no expectation from both sides, from giving or from receiving, then it becomes a more healthy mechanism. The energy starts to flow in a way that there is no obstructions. So I just wanted to give an example of this self-abandonment cycle, and I think it very much relates to giving, because sometimes when we overgive, we abandon ourselves because we put somebody else's needs first, right? So in this self-abandonment cycle, it starts with you overgiving and under-receiving, and you perceive this imbalance. So once you perceive this imbalance, it comes out as anger, resentment, protest behavior, and it works for both ways. When you're receiving and you're guilty, when you're giving that you're guilty. So when it comes out, it comes up as anger and resentment, and you start protesting because you feel things are unfair. Then you express that anger or explosive emotions, and then what happens? You feel guilty. And then you start to overcompensate, and you go back to overgiving and under-receiving. So it becomes this vicious cycle. And all that is in the middle of it is guilt, the feeling of, feeling guilty for giving or for receiving. And
yeah, you can look, this comes back down to childhood. This is something you've learned, right? The relationship you have with your parents is what you have with the world, and the relationship you had with your childhood is what you have with life. So, when I'm coaching somebody, I look at, okay, there's your problem as you see it, okay, but how does it serve you? It's my first question always, like, how does it serve you having this problem? What are you talking about? It's usually serving you in some way, right? What's the payoff you're getting? And once you identify the payoff, and then I start looking at, okay, when was the earliest memory you had of where you felt this, you needed this, and it first came about? Well, it happened, and then they look back, and if they're truthful, a moment happened when they were 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, and then they could start to see where it stemmed from, and it became this habit, it became a way of being, because if they were giving, then they would get the love, right? Because they felt there was scarcity. And if they gave themselves, and I remember myself, of service, to my dad, in order to get love or any time I could get it. So then you obviously cultivate this habit, right, of doing this, because where does it really come from? I'm not enough to receive love, so I need to do something. So when you're in that place of doing something or giving something, it's because you don't feel enough, ultimately, because you didn't get the love you deserved as a child who needed it in order to grow and expand. So you seek it, that pain, to dissolve it in some way, but then you're passing that pain and you're finding other people to be in agreement with you to say, hey, you're going to be my mum or dad, and I'm going to give in order to keep this dynamic going. And they're like, sure, I've got my own childhood trauma, let's play this baby out, right? So until you kind of agree to looking into it, you're going to keep playing this out with every new business venture, relationship, whatever else it is. So when you start to explore that and you identify it, suddenly it's just self-awareness really is enough. And once you're aware of it, you're like, well, now I'm aware of it. It's not an unconscious pattern.
Yeah. I remember that guilt of receiving was a topic of my breath work that I did a series of breath work with Katya, and it was one of those sessions that was solely dedicated to guilt. And when I was on the other side of the cycle, once you finish your cycle and you come to your aha moment, I realized that the other side of guilt is innocence. So when, like Alex said, ask yourself when first that innocence was taken away from you. How was it taken away from you? When did you give up your innocence in return for somebody else's approval? When did you enter into this game, like you said?
Yeah. When did you enter into the agreement that love was scarce and you had to do something in order to get it? Because once you go from that intention, that dynamic, then you're going to play that out to the day you die until you're aware of it. But that's the point. When you're giving in that place, then you're not really coming from abundance. Really, you're coming from lack, right? If you're still there. But if you transform that like Julia has, and she can give from a place of abundance, she's not doing it out of, reacting out of pain of a child, the inner child needing love. Now you are in a state of giving from abundance, your higher self, and that's why we receive so much more. And that's why you teach to so many other people. So that's transforming of energy. You're not to say that you can't give to anybody, but to see if it's toxic, or are you doing it from a place of abundance? Well, you'll know, because your life will demonstrate it, and you'll know which one it is. So let's be truthful with yourself, and then we can start to heal it.
Beautiful. Thank you for the question. This was a very
Thank
beautiful question.
you.
Just to summarize.
To summarize. To summarize. So we looked at, of course, identifying that. You know, is it a toxic giving, or are you in a place of giving abundantly? And looking at the dynamics between your childhood and where you are now, and
and then turning your guilt into innocence.
Yep.
Loving that part of yourself that is innocent, and affirming your innocence, and putting your self-worth and your well-being first.
And owning your agreement with the other person, or why you're playing this out, so that you can release them and yourself,
and have a very good relationship with the universe, knowing that when you give, nothing gets taken away from you, and you just reaffirm your abundant source, and then it becomes a relationship with the universe rather than a relationship with other people's needs. You step up your game, right?
And then you become a bigger vessel to receive a lot more, and you can give a lot more. And people who are receiving from you don't feel like it's an exchange of disagreement or pain. It's something else of a higher.
They get inspired to ignite their own source of abundance.
Yes.
That is the true giving.
Not ignited by pain.
Yes, exactly. Or like dependency.
Yeah, exactly. Because also, when you're coming from the higher place of giving, you're not attached to the very thing you're giving. So you're not ultimately expecting a result back. Because when you're receiving from the universe and you give, there's no attachment. So there's no agreement. You're just free flowing, because I know it's coming to me.
Thank you. We love you, and until next time.
Much love.
Bye.
Bye.